Welcome to Investing, Part 2, Day number 2. My name is Mentor Ate, and I'm delighted to be here with you. In today's session, I'm going to be sharing some of the rules of investing, some of the principles, you might call them laws, that I've learned and that I've been applying in various areas of my life to create the results that I want. We started 2 days ago the investment series and the investment session, and for those of you joining for the first time, this is going to be probably a 2 weeks, you might call it a course, you might call it a seminar, you might call it a learning experience. But every single day I'm going to share as much as I know, as much as I've learned, and more importantly, all of what I've applied that have created results in my life. And the intention is not really for you to apply the same principles that I have used. My whole purpose and my objective is in 3 parts. Number 1, to provide you with good ideas. I believe that ideas are the seeds for all achievement and all success. Number 2, I want to provide you with an increase in your awareness about a few investment concepts, words, strategies, so that you're more empowered to make the right decisions in your personal life or perhaps in your business life. Number 3, to increase your understanding. The great wise King Solomon said, "In all you're getting, get understanding." And I believe that wisdom, like he said, is the principal thing. And so if I can raise your understanding, I believe that with a combination of ideas that will come with inspiration and information, combined with awareness, combined with understanding, then empowers you to take the right actions, and if done in the right way, you get good results. And so in today's session, I'm going to be sharing some of the rules of investing, but also I'm going to share what I consider to be the most critical part of the investment journey, and that is the investor. So as we begin, let me lay some foundations that would set the theme and perhaps serve as a reference point as we journey along. Investing in itself is I call it an intellectual game. It's not an emotional game. In other words, you've got to think. You've got to think from your emotions, not with your emotions. Now, to suggest that you have to be emotionless is not possible, because we have emotions. But your emotions have to be disciplined if you're going to be a great investor. You must use your intellect, and then allow your intellect, more importantly your wisdom, to guide your decision making. And obviously use your emotions, because there's a part of you that we're going to talk about as we journey through, which is your intuition. And intuition, in my definition, is simply your ability to detect, sense, on the spiritual level, not on the physical level, on the spiritual level, when something doesn't feel right. That requires study. So investing is a game. If you're going to play a game, you've got to know the rules. If you don't know the rules, the chances that you could win are very slim. For so many years, I played the game of money, the game of wealth. Every one of us is playing that same game. Some of us have other people playing the game for us, but eventually we get to a certain age when we have to take charge. Like I did for so many years, I found that I was failing. And the reason I was failing was because I didn't understand the rules. And I was like an amateur playing against professionals. I didn't understand the vocabulary. I didn't understand words. I didn't even understand the rules of engagement. And as a result of that, the results that I was creating reflected my ignorance. And it wasn't until I started to change my understanding, it wasn't until I started to study that I began to change my results. So in this journey we're going through, what you're going to find is that I'm going to be making reference to some words. Those words, I'm trying to imprint those words deep in your mind so that every time you think about investing, those words pop out. One of those words is the word wisdom. You're going to hear this, you're going to see this as we journey along. Because without wisdom, you're limited. As a matter of fact, the level of your success in life will seldom exceed the level of your wisdom in any area of life. So, should you have a desire to change your results, you have to begin by changing yourself. And the starting point is by improving your wisdom through study. So that's what we're doing today. We're simply studying. Let's get started and talk about the rules. Some basic rules to get you started. I mentioned yesterday that there was a simple principle. The principle I mentioned was that wealth and poverty are like both sides of a coin. And every coin has three sides. If you stand on the edge of the coin, then you can assess both sides and make the right decisions. You see, poverty and wealth, none is either good or bad. It's all a matter of perspective. Shakespeare said, nothing is good or bad, but your thinking makes it so. But I'm of the opinion that your poverty doesn't help anyone, but wealth can help other people. So I tend to subscribe to the side of wealth because I believe that if I can help other people, then I can make a difference. And so wealth begins by understanding a simple basic formula. I call this formula E minus I minus S. This is the wealth formula. I'm starting with wealth because it's the foundation to invest in. The formula simply says that wealthy people earn, but the first thing they do when they earn is they invest. And then once they're done investing, they can spend. So, the first rule, if you're going to enjoy this investment journey, the first rule is that you must discipline yourself to pay yourself first. And this simply means set aside a portion of what you earn and invest it. Invest a portion of what you have, what you've earned. Number two, once you've set aside a portion of what you've earned, you must invest wisely. Invest wisely and under the guidance of people who have succeeded in that area that you're interested in. In other words, your investment has to be based on sound principles. But more importantly, you have to invest in something that you have an interest in. I'm going to talk about 4 different vehicles and paths that you can choose. But you have to choose what interests you. And the reason is simply because if you have no interest, if you have no passion, what you find is when the going gets tough, you'll be one of the first people to give up. Or, even when things are going well, you'll be one of those people who are naive in reacting with your emotions, with your glands, rather than your intellect. So, number 2 is invest wisely. Find an investment vehicle, study it, find people who are doing well in that investment vehicle, listen to them, and then invest based on their instructions. Now, once you've invested wisely, your investment will start to produce a return. The key to wealth multiplication is always to reinvest your returns. Make it more practical. You invest £1,000. Let's assume you get 10% return. 10% return is £100. If you want to become wealthy and you want to become a good investor, what you must do, keep your principal amount in the investment vehicle and then redirect your interests, your dividends, your profits, reinvest it back. This is what Albert Einstein called the eighth wonder of the world. The principle called compound. In other words, you're compounding your investment. A farmer takes a seed, puts it in the ground, waters the ground, nurtures the ground, protects the ground. The seed eventually produces a harvest. The farmer, if the farmer wants to be wealthy, must take the harvest and discipline himself or herself not to consume everything. Let's assume the farmer has one seed and the harvest creates 100 seeds. The farmer has a choice. The farmer can set aside the original one seed created and put it back in the ground, and it will produce another 100. They can set aside one again, put it back in the ground, and they consumed 99 seeds. The farmer will stay poor. A wise farmer, on the other hand, will take all of what they've harvested and put it in the ground, because each of these harvests now will produce 100. So now the farmer has a multiple of hundreds. He can then build up, this is investing basics, you build up your portfolio up to a point whereby you have so many seeds creating a harvest for you before you start to consume your seed. It's very tempting. And that is the reason why I started yesterday by saying that the most important part of the journey to wealth is understanding your purpose. What is the purpose of your investment? For example, are you investing for quick cash? Are you perhaps short of cash? You need money every month. You need money desperately. Now, if you need money immediately, then investing everything you create for the long term might not be the right vehicle for you. If on the other hand, you're investing for the long term, perhaps you're thinking about retirement, perhaps you're thinking about becoming wealthy, becoming financially free, getting out of the rat race, then this is a path that you can choose. But the key here is set aside a portion of what you've earned, invest it, and then reinvest. You reinvest the returns. Number 4, once you've reinvested the returns, it starts to create. The key thing here is, whilst you're investing wisely, recognize that you'll be tempted. You'll be tempted by opportunities and perhaps beautiful investment vehicles, paths, options that sound very good. The key here is, I normally say to people, recognize that investing and getting wealthy is boring. I know that sounds really weird and strange, but if you do it the right way, it's boring. It's not exciting, because what you're doing, if you're using wisdom, is you're selecting investment paths, you're selecting investment options, you're even selecting investment returns that are not too good to be true. In other words, you're going to have to invest for the long term. You have to understand and appreciate that when you begin your journey. The whole concept that you're going to get 25% return, 30% return, 40% return, that's great. That's awesome. But be wise. You're better off getting something safe and secure than losing. This is going to bring us to the next point I'm going to talk about. So my recommendation for number 4 is safe returns. So this could be something maybe 8%, 10%, 12%. That's okay. for the long term, that's okay. The 25% and the 40% come normally, not always, they often come with a lot of risks. So I would simply suggest that you use wisdom. Number 5 is a principle that you should never invest in any vehicle whereby you have a risk of losing your initial capital, your initial principal, £1,000. So never invest in a place whereby you could lose. In other words, never lose. Now, Warren Buffett said that the first rule of investing is never lose your capital. Rule number 2, never forget rule number 1. You must protect your initial capital investment. You must have a way to walk away from the deal, maybe after a few months, after a few years, without losing your original capital. That is one of the qualities of a good investor. You're trying not to lose money. Now, let me talk about number 6, and this is where I stop. My recommendation in terms of number 6 is always practice the discipline of asset allocation. Asset allocation. I'm not talking about diversification per se. Somewhat it does involve diversifying, but most people sometimes confuse both concepts. If you invest in stocks, for example, some people say, well, diversify your stocks. You're simply buying different variations of stocks. You're still in the same asset group. What I'm talking about with asset allocation is, let's assume, for example, you have an interest in oil. The key here is with investing, you should never invest more than 70% in one vehicle. And you should never invest in one single vehicle. I'll say that again. The key is never invest more than 70% of what you have, all of your assets. Never allow all of your assets to be placed, all of your investment seed to be placed in one vehicle. That's number 1. Number 2, never put more than 70% in a particular vehicle. It's best to assign some of your assets, some of your investment seeds to other investment options. The reason is simply because what you're trying to do is provide protection. There will always be cycles, so you want to protect against the counter-cyclical approach of the market. So let's assume you have an interest in stocks, and that's where you love, that's what gets you excited. Never invest more than 70% in stocks. Always have maybe some investment in property, maybe some investment in the business, maybe some investments in commodities, but allocate your assets in various ways. Now, the best way I can explain how to do this is by referring you back to your purpose. I said that if you understand the purpose of anything, if you know the why, then you understand what to do and how. If you're in your late 50s and you're approaching retirement, you don't have so much time to make mistakes and correct your mistakes. If you're in your 20s, then you have a little bit more time, so you can afford to make some of the more risky investment decisions and still have enough time to right your wrongs. Therefore, in terms of asset allocation, it will depend, number 1, on your purpose, number 2, on your age, number 3, and more importantly, it will depend on what you're expecting as the outcome from your investments. Now, these are some simple rules to remember. If you burn these rules into your mind, what you'll find is whatever deal comes your way, and they will come. They will come. You can sit back and ask yourself, does this fit within what I will consider to be my principles? Does this align with my principles? Now, this is what I'm trying to say. If you set aside a portion of what you're going to invest, let's assume this is 10%. If we also assume that as part of this 10%, you have two investment options, and you've decided that you will split this 10% at 70-30, and you do that consistently every single month. Every single month you would do that consistently. Whenever you have an investment deal that comes up that requires, for example, a change to 50% and maybe 50%, you can look at it and say, I can't, because I have rules. It all depends on how well you diversify. So let me just run through these rules again. Number one, pay yourself first. Take a portion of what you earn, set it aside for investing, not for saving. I gave you the formula for wealth as WEIS. The formula for poverty is PESS. Poor people earn the same amount as wealthy people, assuming you have two people doing the same job. One becomes wealthy, one stays poor. They earn the same amount. The difference is not what you do. It's the purpose, it's the intent, it's the meaning, it's the focus behind what you do. They earn the same amount, but the poor person spends first, and as a result of that, they have to save what's left because it's so little, and they have to save for the long term. The key is invest, don't save, invest. Now, I'm not trying to suggest in any way that there'll be no form of saving. Of course there will. The difference is the poor save actively, the wealthy will save passively. Passive saving means there's a date you've set for yourself. You've decided, I'm going to save for 12 months. After 12 months, I'm going to find an investment vehicle to put the money in. I believe personally, if you're saving for more than 12 months, you're getting poorer, and that is active saving. The reason is very simple. The inflation rate in London today is 2.9. I don't know where you're watching from. The banks are paying roughly about 0.025%. It's next to nothing. And inflation is wiping out approximately 3% of what you have. So saving is really a path towards poverty. Your money is depreciating in value, and then the purchasing power of your money is declining. So you must invest. Number two, invest wisely. Find people who understand investments, follow their recommendations, apply wisdom, study, then you invest. Now, the key to investing wisely and achieving your results is consistency. And I normally say to people, you should have an automatic system for all of this. Self-discipline has one purpose: to create a habit. Self-discipline has one purpose: the ability to make yourself do what has to be done, whether you feel like doing it or not, is there to develop a habit. You can't live a life of self-discipline. It's too exhausting. So what we do is we discipline ourselves for a period, and if we do it consistently, at the end of that period, I usually say 100 days, you develop a habit, and then it becomes automatic and instinctive. However, when it comes to investing, you have to take away a lot of your decision-making ability with relation to setting money aside, because things will happen. There might be unforeseen circumstances. So what you will do to avoid regret is simply create an automatic system whereby every month the money automatically is taken from your personal account, is transferred to your investment portfolio. So it's invested consistently. Compound interest And compounding works if you do it consistently. Now, once you've invested, you will create profit, you will create dividends, you will create some form of revenue, whatever that might be. The key to wealth, if you want to be wealthy, reinvest your returns. Don't spend it. Reinvest it. Reinvest your returns. Number 4, always select safe investment returns. Don't be drawn to the very exciting high yields and returns. Often they come with a lot of risks. I said investing is a boring game if you do it well. And part of the reason for that is because you have to do it consistently. You have to be focused. It gets to a point where it's just repetitive, but over time, it creates what I call an avalanche of great results. Look at Warren Buffett, for example. Look at Bill Gates. Look at Jeff Bezos. If you look at all of the people in the Forbes 400, one of the things you find out is they created and built their wealth slowly. It wasn't built instantly. The reason is because everything of value requires time. Diamonds are formed by compressing all the carbon particles and staying tightly fit together, and over so long a period of time, you have something so beautiful. So, if you're going to invest, do it wisely. Go for safer returns. 8%, 10%, 15%. Whatever you can get above the average, I think is good. Anything that doesn't seem right, sounds too good to be true, normally it's too good to be true. Next, never lose your investment. And finally, always practice the discipline of asset allocation. In other words, don't put all your eggs in one basket. If you're beginning your journey towards wealth, recognize something. Your wisdom has not developed to the level whereby you understand every single decision that is necessary and you can make every single decision right. You will make mistakes along the way, therefore you want to protect yourself. And I would normally say, never put more than 70% of one in one investment. Never put all of your eggs in one basket. Now, the wealthy and the very sophisticated investors apply a principle they call focus. They put their eggs in a basket and they protect the basket through various options. Insurance, they hedge, but they've developed the skill set needed to be able to focus. You and I have to begin slowly, and as we journey, we'll find out what we have a passion for, but more importantly, we'll find out the disadvantages and advantages of various investment options. Now, these are the rules. What we're going to do next is move into the investor, because I think, in my opinion, that's where the juice really lies, in the investor. Now, the first thing I'm going to talk about as we discuss the investor, the first thing I'm going to mention is this. Your success in investment will be dependent on you. I have an engineering background, building design and construction. So what you find is I'll make a lot of references to my past, but also my experience. One of the things that every great contractor will tell you, every architect, every engineer, they'll tell you that the building has a part that is not seen, but is the most important part, and that is the foundation. The foundation of a building supports the building. It supports the entire structure. So if this were to represent pillars of your life, different areas of your life, happiness, health, wealth, the foundation upon which you build your buildings in your life is very important. And so what we must start with is the foundation. That foundation is you. And so what I'm going to suggest is, to become a good investor, you have to recognize that there are three parts to what you can create. There are three parts to what makes you a great investor. There are three component parts to the foundation. Number one, mindset. Number two, skill set. Number three, your wisdom. Three essential pillars, three essential parts to what will make you a great investor. I'm going to deal with these three individually. I'm going to try and do it as quickly as I can, but I think this is a great place to start. And once we've laid this foundation, then we can start talking about investment opportunities, investment deals. And more than anything, we can go into the analysis of all the investment options that we can lay our hands on. And that would support your decisions. But first of all, we have to begin with you. The ancient story talks about two men. One of them is called the wise man, simply because he built his house on the rock. The other built his house on the sand. And the account of the story says that when the winds came and they beat against the houses, and the rain and the tides, the house built on the sand collapsed. The house built on the rock stood strong. If you have solid foundation, whether it's a booming season or a lax season, it doesn't affect you because you're built on solid ground. And that's the reason why I want you to take this section very important. I know it might sound not sexy enough, but it's important. Remember what I said? Investing and creating wealth is a boring experience. It's a long-term experience, and it requires you doing things perhaps that are not really cool, but they're essential. Now, in terms of mindsets, we're talking about your mind. How do you think? Your mind is your greatest asset. To try to become a great investor without being, a great thinker. A person with a great mind is simply a struggle against life. You will lose, especially if you're making the decisions yourself. Now, one of the things I'm going to talk about is a part of your mind that helps you become a great investor. I'm going to talk about what we call your 5 higher faculties. All greatness, all success, all wealth is hidden in understanding your 5 higher faculties and using your higher faculties. We all have a mind. If that is to represent your mind, conscious mind, subconscious mind. We call this your thinking mind, your intellectual mind. We call this your emotional mind. This part of your mind is subjective. You can choose, you can select. This part of your mind is not subjective. It cannot choose. It cannot even differentiate or distinguish between what's real or what's imagined. This part of your mind has 5 senses: sight, sound, touch, smell, taste. But you also have your higher faculties in your conscious mind. And I'm going to talk about 3 of those higher faculties and why you must become great in using those faculties. Many of us have been trained on our 5 senses. We use our eyes every day, so we know what looks good, what doesn't look too great. We use our hearing every day. We know what is classical music, and we know what is pop or rock or dance. We use our taste. We can distinguish between what's Italian food and what's French. We can touch. We know what's hot, we know what's cold. And we can walk into a room and the fragrance in the air is very inviting. The same way we can walk into another room and the smell, the odor in the room is so repelling. We've developed our five senses. Very few of us have developed our higher faculties. Now I did make a mistake. I should correct that. This is 6, not 5, 6 higher faculties. 5 senses, 6 higher faculties. Now what are your higher faculties? Imagination, perception, intuition, reason, memory, will. I'm just going to talk about 3 of them. This in itself is a session. I want to just draw your attention to 3 parts of your higher faculties which you must develop. Number 1 is imagination. Imagination is simply your ability to create a picture of what you want, to create a fantasy, to create a vision of something in the future that you want. Hold on to that picture. Hold on to that picture so clearly. Put that picture in your subconscious mind by associating emotions with that thought, idea, or picture, and it gets planted in your subconscious mind, and automatically this causes you to take certain actions. But more importantly, imagination comes by your ability to live in the feeling of the wish fulfilled. So if you want to be a good investor, you've got to use your imagination. I'll break it down into various umbrellas. A lot of people are too skeptical. They're too pessimistic. They can't see possibilities. You have to see possibilities. In other words, let me give you a good example. If you were to be invested in real estate, you come to a property, you've got to be able to see what other people cannot see. When you see with your eyes, we call that sight. We call that sight. Your eyes helps you see. Seeing by sight is a function of using your eyes. Everyone can do that. The best investors in properties and real estate are those who see with their mind. We call that vision. So 2 people come to an investment property. One of them can only see a derelict building, an old building. All they can see is all the dirt and the work that has to be done to restore the building. The second person moves away from their sight and moves to their mind. They look at the same building and they see a casino. They see an office building. They see residential. They not only see what potentially could become of the building, they see 30, 40 years. They look around the surrounding and say, there could be some infrastructure upgrades around this community. And therefore, I can expand. I can perhaps buy this land and expand the building to the back to the rear, and I can create much more. So they're thinking about 10, 15 years ahead. They're not thinking about what it has to offer now. This is simply instant gratification and willingness to delay gratification. But you cannot do that without imagination. Now, I'm not suggesting in any way that you become so imaginative that you don't see what's real. No, I'm saying you see with your eyes, but you're not limited by sight. So the first thing you must develop in terms of your mindset is imagination. The second thing I want to talk about is perspective. Perspective. You're about to invest in shares or bonds. You're about to invest in perhaps stocks. But with perspective, you ask yourself a simple question. What am I not seeing? What am I not seeing? 2 glasses. You hold 2 glasses in your hand, same contents. You give it to one person. One person says, well, this is half empty. The other person says, well, it's half full. What's the difference? Perspective. Perspective is simply how you perceive things. So if you're about to invest in bonds and stocks, gold, whatever that might be, you ask yourself a simple question. What am I not seeing? The power of asking questions, but more importantly, the power to step back and say, I could be wrong, is a powerful quality to have as an investor. I talked about baseball in day one, and I said, in baseball, you can strike a few times and strike out. If you strike 3 times out of 10, you're considered a genius. 4, you're considered a hero. But when it comes to investing, you don't always have to swing. You can wait. In other words, no one is striking you out by not taking a swing. A lot of people react. A deal comes along and someone says, this is the deal of the decade, you have to invest. And we react rather than respond. So as an investor, you have to have great ability to see things beyond what is visible. And I normally say this, nothing is ever as it first appears. The closer you look, the more you start to identify things that you didn't see before. And the reason is not because you're seeing something wrong, it's simply focus. Perhaps your experiences have led you down whereby all you can see is perhaps all that your physical eyes can see. You must be able to zoom in and zoom out so you can see the wood from the trees before you make a decision. So perspective is very important in investing. You're asking yourself, okay, it's a great investment, perfect. What could go wrong? What am I not seeing? The third mindset quality I'm going to talk about is reason. Reason is simply your ability to think. Henry Ford said, thinking is the most difficult work that we're capable of. Another author said, 2% of the people think. 3% think that they think, or rather believe that they think. 95% of the population will rather die than think. Now, for so many years, I struggled with thinking. Reason? We weren't taught how to think. We're not taught how to think, even though it's the most and the highest activity that we're capable of doing. We're not taught how to think. So, for so many years, I would begin to think and I would fall asleep. Or if I had to think about something, I got so stressed out about it because I didn't know how to think, it drove me mad. I ended up not thinking. I ended up doing something else. Good investors are great thinkers because they use their reasoning capacity. Now, what is reason? Your reason and reasoning is simply your ability to use your inductive and deductive faculties, whereby you, like a scientist, analyze the evidence and you pick out and separate parts. The easiest thing I can give you on the best way to think is simply this. Don't focus on thinking. Forget about thinking. Focus on asking questions. I'll say that again. Focus on asking questions. Because when you're asking questions, you're thinking. Thinking is simply asking and answering questions. The more questions you ask, the more you're thinking. So great investors are those who ask great questions. Now, I'm not talking about having answers. I'm talking about questions. Those we call geniuses are those who have questions, who ask questions relentlessly. Those we call good people and great people, they have the answers. The intelligent people have the answers. The geniuses have the questions. You see, wherever you have a question, you have an answer hidden within the question. All of the answers to life are hidden in questions. All you have to do is ask and you receive. Seek and you find. Knock and the door will be open. So get really good at asking questions, and you don't have to begin with intelligent questions. Start where you are. Ask silly questions until you get great at asking good questions. So if you want to be a good investor, begin by developing 3 things to help your mindset: imagination, your ability to see beyond what seems, perspective, change your view. Change your view. Get away from focus, defocus, so you can see the wood from the trees, so you can make the right choices. Number 3, become great at asking questions. The more questions you ask about investments, the more you have answers. You know, I've been astonished and stunned. Some people walk into an investment deal, for example, property investment, and they look at the first property. They read through all of the information that has been provided, and they put a payment down for the investment. Just like that. They haven't asked one question. If you're going to be a good investor, you've got to be a good negotiator. A simple question such as, I know you're trying to sell this property for 400,000. What would be the bare minimum that you would accept to walk before you walk away from the deal? Now, this is a question you as a buyer, you're asking a seller. Yes, you want 400,000, but what would you accept? What would you entertain as the minimum? The seller says 360,000. Now, this may have been listed for a minimum of 400,000. Understand something, it's been listed by a mortgage broker, an agent. Obviously, they make a percentage on the sale. So if they can sell it for the highest price, it favors them because they're getting a percentage of the total sell amount. The seller, on the other hand, perhaps really needs to sell, and he wants out. So one person goes up and says, it's 400,000, we like your property, you've listed it as the minimum price, okay, we'll pay. A wise investor says, what will be the minimum you would consider? Now, the person says 360, that becomes the points where you begin to negotiate. You don't start negotiating at 400. No, you haven't even arrived. He says 360. Now we can talk, we can deal. You can now make an offer less than 360. That seems reasonable, that you believe seems right. The key here is you're always trying to buy a deal. You're not thinking about price, forget price. You're not thinking about value, forget value. What is it worth? That's the key to investing. What is it worth? If you can buy for less the price, that's okay. But it could be worth nothing. It could have sold you a sucker. The value can be increased. It can also decrease. What you're focusing on is what is it worth? You always want to buy something that is worth much more. So, questions. Ask a question. Now, you could ask the question intelligently and get a good response, because the quality of the answers you get is always based on the quality of the questions you ask. Empowering questions will always create empowering answers. Likewise, disempowering questions will create disempowering answers. Now, I'm going to stop there now and move away from mindset. But this is so fundamental. I might come back later on and talk about a few of the other areas and mindsets that you have to develop. But every great investor has a remarkable mindset. Every great investor has a remarkable mindset. Everyone can learn. They're not born with it, but it requires daily, continuous, constant, never-ending improvement. They keep perfecting their mind, and so they stay sharp and they remain good investors. So we've dealt with mindset. Let me move to skill set very quickly. If you're going to invest, you will need skills. You will also need tools. You will need skills and you will need tools. Depending on the investment vehicle you choose, the skills and the tools you need will vary. You got to understand this. Real estate, business, commodities, paper assets. Now, these are the four basic and most important investment vehicles. The skills needed to be a great investor is different from being a business owner. I'm not talking about business manager, business owner. The skills required to be a great business owner is different from the skills needed to be a great gold, silver, or any other commodity dealer or investor. Similarly, that skill is different to the skill needed for stocks and bonds and mutual funds. So you've got to have skills. To get the skills, you're going to need study. Now, here is the point I want to make, and I want you to listen and understand this very carefully. You can succeed in everything. You're better off focusing. Find what interests you the most. You can't be doing gold and doing silver, running all the businesses and doing exceptionally well, doing a lot of real estate, doing a lot of paper bonds, mutual funds. This is where the power of having a team comes in. You can delegate and use leverage, use other people, and focus on one or two. When we talk about investing, we talk about Warren Buffett. When we talk about maybe real estate, we might talk about the likes of Donald Trump, based on what he's achieved as an investor. When you go into gold, silver, when you go into oil, you have other people. So you have to choose. Now, it doesn't mean you can't invest in other options. No, it simply means you just simply focus on where you have your strengths. The key to being a good investor is focus on your strengths and leverage your weakness. There'll be things you don't know. Don't try to become so great in your weak areas. Otherwise, what you end up having is so many skills that you're not really good at using. You have a lot of tools that you're not really great at using. Use leverage. Focus. Focus is simply flourish in one commitment until you're successful. So my recommendation in beginning your journey, decide which of the options interest you the most. Decide which of the options generate a level of passion and excitement, the way you want to study the most about. And that's the one you should follow. As you invest in the other ones, use leverage. Very simple, but it's effective. Now, in choosing the right investment vehicle, there are a few things you might have to consider, and we'll talk about those as we journey along. But the point I'll make in terms of your skill set is recognizing, like every ladder, you have to take one step, move up the next leg, one step, move the legs, and what you have is knowledge and tools are like each of your legs. The whole purpose of having two different sets of legs, one right and one left, is simply because as you take a step to the left, you correct with the right. Otherwise, if you had two left feet, you would just keep moving in one direction, or the other direction if you had two right feet. But the purpose of having two different legs is simply you correct as you go along, and that moves you steadily in the direction that you want to travel in. Skills are important. You get skills by study, you get skills through knowledge, but you also need tools. You need tools. Tools are extremely important, but I won't focus too much on using tools for now, because the key to investing is this. I'm going to say something that might be contradictory to what I share later on. You've got to be so focused as an investor that you almost seem to be lazy in the eyes of some people. I'll say that again. You've got to be so focused on what you're good at to the point where you might seem lazy in the eyes of other people. In other words, there's so many things you're going to have to ignore and have other people do them for you. Have great counsel, but focus on what you're great at. And using tools, we'll talk about some of the tools and how to apply some of the tools as we go along. But what you find is you don't have to do everything yourself. It's good to know how it works so that you can get the best advice from the right people. But don't try to do it on your own. The whole purpose of being an investor is so that you have money work for you. You're not about to become an employee. You must think. That's why I started with mindset. You must think like an investor. You must act like an investor, and you must become an investor. You're not looking for a job. If you're in the habit of wanting to do everything on your own, you're going to struggle. I'm going to give you a good example of how this works. My background, I said earlier on, is engineering. Spent about 15 years working, designing great buildings all over the world, constructing, designing. And so I understand buildings. To an extent, I have a bias towards real estate because I understand it. I also understand business, but not as well as I understand real estate or buildings. But my skills that I've learned, that I've acquired over so many years as an engineer, understanding buildings, I consider those skills in many cases to be a liability to me than an asset. Because if I'm in the process of investing in a property, the technical part of me wants to come out. If I've bought the property and they're doing some work to it, the technical part of me wants to come out. That I have to suppress that part of me and say, listen, you're not an employee. Let the professionals do what they do best. Stand back. Use your education and your experience to ask the right questions, but you have to trust the professionals to do it and do a good job. Take a step back. And I can tell you this, it's a challenge. It's a huge challenge because it's something you've done for so long and you want to be able to say, no, I don't think this is the right way to do it. Obviously, it doesn't mean you accept everything they say, but you have to know when you draw the line and you say, I'm going to be so focused on finding the next deal, I'm not going to get bogged down in trying to look at the numbers or how everything fits. I'm going to be lazy. So we're going to talk about some tools you're going to need to improve your skill set for each investment option. And what you'll find is that some of the tools, you may have the passion for a particular investment, but the tools, perhaps the burden of either managing it or leveraging it becomes too much, and you say, okay, maybe I don't want to invest with this. I'm going to do it passively. I'm not going to do it actively. Now, the final thing I want to talk about is wisdom. I want to share some thoughts on what I think you should consider. Every investor that I know that has succeeded has succeeded not because of chance, not because of luck. They've succeeded because they made right choices, right decisions, and took the right action. But all of them would tell you that it all began through study. If you're going to be successful as an investor, you have to study. And here are some recommendations. The reason I've started with this today and not investing and doing deals is simply for one particular purpose. If you don't build the foundation of your financial future and your investment future correctly, you will make mistakes. You might start really well, but you make mistakes. You stay grounded based on wisdom. Wisdom is what keeps you grounded. It's very easy to get to a point where things are working out so well that you think you're invincible. You think you're untouchable. At that point, that's where you should be worried. Wisdom helps you stay grounded because it helps you and it reminds you about what you know, but it also keeps you humble enough to recognize what you don't know. And true wisdom, through pursuing understanding, what you find is you develop an interest in reading. You get to read other people's experiences and biographies and autobiographies, and you get to see two classes of people. People that are used as examples and people whose lives turned out to be warnings. Don't do what these people did. Follow this group of people. And when you study the lives of people and history, what you find is the people who fail eventually, after succeeding for so long, were those who became complacent. They thought they were invincible. And so that helps you stay grounded. So wisdom, I think, is where wealth really is created. And part of the reason is because with skill sets, you're talking about knowledge and tools. Knowledge, in my opinion, is simply like having a piece of hammer. Wisdom is knowing when to use it, where to use it, how to use it, more importantly, when to set it aside and pick up a different instrument. That's wisdom. My recommendation in beginning your journey, if you're starting, is this. Before you start investing, study. Study first. Now I'm going to use myself as a reference point for the next few minutes. I want to share with you how I began, and this is my recommendation to everyone. I have a principle. The principle is simply that between 5 and 10% of your time every day should be invested in study, in increasing your wisdom, in increasing your financial education, in increasing your ability to invest, in personal development, in learning from the masters, in studying great investors, in analyzing deals. Between 5 and 10% of your time. Between 5 and 10% of what you earn, your net income should be invested in yourself. Now we can make this simple by saying, let's keep it at 5%. We get 24 hours, pardon me, we get 24 hours every single day. 5% of 24 hours is 1.5 hours. Every day. Every day. And I should say that includes weekends as well. 5% of your net income should be diverted to invest in yourself. You see, you are the seed. The soil is rich. The seed has to be rich as well. Interestingly, because the soil is rich, the soil verifies the quality of the seed. But if you were dealing with any kind of soil, if you have good seed, then the seed verifies the quality of the soil. You are a seed. If you want to create a harvest, you've got to invest yourself. You've got to put yourself in the ground to create a harvest. So my recommendation, like every farmer, you get a harvest, you don't consume all the harvest. In other words, you have 24 hours a day. You don't spend 24 hours. You have to set aside a portion of your time for a return. Likewise, you earn every month. You don't spend all of it. You don't even invest all of it, because the quality of your investment decisions are based on you. You must take a portion like a farmer, set it aside for the next season, invest in yourself. Now here is my recommendation. I understand that 1.5 hours per day could be too much. I'm not trying to suggest in any way that this is easy. It's simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. There's a reason why the 3% of the population earn more than 97% combined. I believe it's down to a simple principle. They have more wisdom. But more importantly, they're willing to pay the price. Price of study, the price of learning, personal development, growth, improvement. See, if you're willing to pay the price, you get the promise. The soil is neutral. The soil doesn't care whether you're white or black, whether you're young or old, whether you're good looking or not. The soil says, I'm rich, but you must sow a seed before I can give you a harvest. So, if you want to be a great investor, if you want to create wealth, you've got to pay the price. You must pay the price in full. You must pay the price in advance. The price begins with sacrifice. And the price is due every day. Meaning, every day. You don't own success. No one owns success. No one owns wealth. We lease success. Pay the price, you keep it. You don't pay, you lose it. Whatever you don't use, you lose. It's a law of life. You see, getting wealthy and investing, it follows the fundamental principles of life and living. There's a time to sow, there's a time to reap. But you must pay the price through study and sacrifice. So my recommendation is, before you start investing, pay the price. I want you to imagine this, for example. If you have £10,000 to invest, assuming the average person earns £2,000 per month, and you've now generated £10,000 to invest. If all you were able to do, which most people would agree with this, they can only save 10% of what they earn. Very few can save 10. Most people save much less. Some people save just 1% because they have bills to pay and demands. But let's pretend and let's assume it's 10%. Now, if all you were getting is 10% of your saving per month, it would mean that in order for you to save £10,000, you would have had to set aside £200 of this consistently. In other words, £200, if you were to divide this, what you have is 50 months. So this would have taken you approximately 5 years, something in that region. Because every year you're saving £2,400 per month, times 5, that's about £10,000, there or thereabout. So you worked for 5 years. It's insane to to take your £10,000 and put in an investment vehicle based on people's opinions, including mine. I'm going to say that again because I think it's so important. It's insane to take what you've labored for 365 days in a year. Obviously, yes, you don't work every day. Every year for 5 years, you've deprived yourself of all of the good that you could have enjoyed. You take the £10,000, you put it in an investment vehicle based on the so-called experts, including me, based on people's opinions, including mine. It's insane. You must educate yourself, increase your wisdom. Take the information from all the sources and sit down and analyze the information and then make a decision for yourself based on your dreams, based on your goals, but more than anything, because you're going to pay the price. If something goes wrong, the so-called experts, they never pay the price for you. You get to pay the price. So, before you put your £10,000 or more in an investment, start educating yourself. Now, I'm not suggesting that you don't invest until you've studied and studied and studied. No. You must be willing to take a step at a certain point. And that is the reason why, when I talked about the 6 principles and rules of investing, I said one of the principles is invest under the guidance of wise counsel, people who have demonstrated results, but more importantly, invest in a place where you can protect your original capital. The third thing I mentioned was always invest in such a way that the return you were getting wasn't too picture in the sky. In other words, go for above average. Don't be tempted into something that looks too good to be true. All of that requires study. So I can spend a whole day talking about wisdom when it comes to investing, because the quality of your investment decisions will be based on the source from which you draw knowledge and understanding from. So my recommendation as I bring this section to a close is simply this. You can't afford not to do this. It's not a matter of, I can't afford to, I don't have time. You can't afford not to. Some people have worked 50 years. Now this is sad. This is sad. I know people who have worked for 50 years. Incredible people. Diligent, hardworking, committed every single day without fail. Even days when they felt ill, they worked. And at the end of the 50 years, because they lacked financial education and wisdom, all they did for 50 years was give their money to experts, either through pension or through whatever investment vehicle, and they said, I have the best investment advisor. And when they retired, after they had slaved for 50 years working for money, they had nothing. They had nothing, because the decisions and the so-called experts were nowhere to be found. The market had changed, and everything they had worked hard for disappeared. You can't afford to make such mistakes. Now here is how to do this. I know most people work long hours. I know most people have commitments. I know the pain of having to wake up in the morning early, look after a family, go to work, come back, look after your family, and then study. It's difficult. So here is my recommendation. This is how I did it in my case. 1.5 hours seems like a lot. This is a recommendation. Remember this, you get to choose. This is your life. You get to choose. There are 24 hours in a day. On average, we spend 8 hours sleeping. We spend 8 hours on average working. Many of us, however, will spend between 2 and 3 hours traveling to and from work. traveling to work and traveling back from work. We'll spend about an hour preparing in the morning, in the evening for work. Now this simply means that at the end of the day, we'll spend roughly about 20 hours out of the 24 hours, so we have about 4 hours left. The average family will spend 4 hours, between 4 and 6 hours, on what I call entertainment. Now, entertainment is important, but there's a ratio called the E to E ratio, the ratio between entertainment and education. You've got to get it right. Yes, you will need time for family, and let's assume this is an hour and a half. 2.5 hours is too much to spend on social media, Netflix, watching a film, watching the news. All of that you need to de-stress, or some of that I should say you need to perhaps live. But also, you've got to be a wise farmer. What I did in my case was simple. I decided that I obviously couldn't reduce my work hours, so I had a choice. First option, sleep less every day. Reduce it to 7 hours. So I have 1 hour. The most important part of the day is when you wake up. When your mind is free, is clear, you haven't started the demands of the whole day, maybe people are still sleeping, you can spend the first hour investing in your mind. Find somewhere quiet and study. If this is not possible for you, that's okay. You cannot reduce your working hours. So what I decided to do was combine my travel time with my learning time. I call it MOB University. In other words, Mobile University. As I traveled to work, I had approximately 3 hours back and forth. But to study all the way to work is boring. I said at the start, investing and creating wealth is boring. What I had to do was, I made a decision that halfway through my journey to work, I would study. I would just listen to an audiobook. Audio learning is next to the next best thing to sliced bread. You can travel, you can exercise, you can run, you can do various things and study at the same time. I would spend half of my travel time to work studying, and then the remaining half I would spend doing some entertainment. Listen to some music, watch something funny. But the first part of the journey, study. So this meant 0.5 hours going and then 0.5 hours coming back. That covered my 1.5 hours. So I didn't have to change my lifestyle. You don't have to change your lifestyle. You just have to be a little bit more creative and discipline yourself to do it consistently. So number one, invest 5% or more of your time in study. Invest 5% or more of your net income in yourself, in improving your education. The next thing you have to do, if you want to be a good investor, is you need mentors. I keep making reference back to Warren Buffett. For one reason, he's achieved something that very few have achieved. And I think he's earned the right to be listened to. But I studied in Warren Buffett's life, and I found a really fascinating thing about him. When he began his journey, he was intelligent, obviously. He was passionate. He had a mind that was very curious. But he discovered that there was a man who at the time was well known to be the best when it came to investing. His name was Benjamin Graham. Warren Buffett left his hometown of Nebraska and journeyed all the way to New York to go and serve as an apprentice, as a mentee to Benjamin. He had to go learn. And he acquired so much knowledge and wisdom, and that served as a foundation to who he is today. So you have to find mentors. Don't go alone. Find someone who can see what you can't see. Find someone who knows what you don't know. But more importantly, find someone that has a passion to share their life experiences with you and love to teach. Success is a poor teacher. Anyone can tell you about their successes. We learn through our mistakes. So if you can learn from other people's mistakes, you can leapfrog the competition. There is no shortcut to success, but there's a faster way to get to your destination. There is a faster way. You will pay a price. You may not pay the same price, but you will pay a price. So my recommendation is find mentors. Find someone that you can sit under them as mentees and let them mentor you, let them guide you. But here is the point. It's not what you learn, it's who you believe. Intellectually, we understand everything. You know what I'm talking about. Emotionally, in the subconscious mind, we're controlled by our beliefs. So I'm not too concerned with who is teaching you. I'm more concerned with who you believe. So find someone who can guide you. Now, here's another thing I'll suggest you do. When you start to study, dedicate 15 minutes every day to analyze deals. Analysis is important. You don't have all the wisdom yet, no problem. But start developing the habit of pulling out a deal, looking at a deal and saying, I wouldn't make this deal because, put down the reasons. Start analyzing deals, because a time will come when you can look at a deal and within a few seconds you just say, well, not for me. Within a few minutes you say, not for me. Or better still, within a few minutes you say, I need further analysis. Something looks good here or something doesn't look right. But start analyzing deals. 15 minutes every day. Now you can spend 1.5 hours studying, traveling back and from work. The problem with audio learning is it limits you. So if you're driving, you can't analyze. And that's the reason why I think waking up early is important, because you can dedicate some time to sitting down, pick a pen, pick a calculator, and think, and then put your thoughts down in writing. Think, put your thoughts in writing. So 15 minutes every day, find something to analyze. It could be perhaps something on TV, or watching TV and someone says something and you just hold that thought and say, do you know what? I'm going to spend some minutes and just put down some thoughts as to why that deal doesn't look right, or maybe what I would have done differently. So it's a must. Dedicate 15 minutes every day to analyzing deals. Now, this is some of the things you can consider doing. It's not exhaustive, but these are some of the things that start to help empower you and improve your ability to think like an investor, act like an investor, and then slowly you start becoming the person that you dream about. Mentors are important. Audio learning is important. Analyzing deals are important. Investing in yourself triumphs everything. You must invest in yourself. Now that's where I'm going to kind of bring everything to conclusion today. That's where I'm going to stop. I hope it's been interesting. I hope it's been useful. We're going to start tomorrow's session. I'm going to pick one investment vehicle and we're going to begin the journey. We're going to look at how to start investing and where to invest, what to do, what to not to do, because in many cases, becoming wealthy can be achieved by simply eliminating poor decisions and poor choices. If you eliminate, think about this. If you look back at your life in the last 10 years and ask yourself the question, what would my life be like today if I didn't make all of the mistakes I made over 10 years? What you find is that puts you already in the top percentile. It's not about trying to do more things. In many cases, it's really a case of trying to learn. Yes. In many cases, it's more about trying to unlearn. Just stop doing and making poor choices. Now, I hope that's been useful, but I'm looking forward to tomorrow's session because it's going to be more practical. We'll become more analytical. It'll become quite numeric. I have a calculator, we can punch numbers, and then we can build on that as we go forward. I'll say this as I conclude. The level of your success will seldom exceed the level of your wisdom. It will seldom exceed who you are. Your character is so vital in this journey that if your character is strong, your decisions will be right. The whole purpose of a goal is not really about the destination. So when you're investing, it's less about the destination. It's more about who you become in pursuit of the goal. So a lot of what we'll focus on will be getting your character right, getting your behavior right, getting your attitude right before you start making important decisions. I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope you found something worth sitting in for. Until tomorrow, God bless.